Hey, what is up? Nexus1G here, and I'm bringing you another video regarding, well, it's related to my last video about the Xbox 360 controllers, using it on PC without aim assist and all that stuff, and whether or not it really compares to the keyboard and mouse. Now, when I had posted that video, I got some guff, and had a request that, hey, if you really want to prove a point here, do it in a game that's made for keyboard and mouse, whereas Call of Duty is a game built to use on consoles, which I agree, definitely it is. Counterstrike is a game where it's built for keyboard and mouse. It's not meant to be used by a console controller. So what I did was I went ahead and I said, I'll go ahead and make this video to the viewer. And as you can see, here I am in Counter-Strike. I was able to execute a config that allows me to use the Xbox controller. If you are curious about that, what you do is you just open up your console, type EXEC space 360 controller, and then press enter. That'll load up all of the config files to use the 360 controller with Counter-Strike. It's kind of difficult to do otherwise, as far as I'm not even sure if it's really feasible to try to do it manually, but that is a way to do it. So once you get that working, as far as adjusting for sensitivity, I still haven't figured that out. The game, as I'm playing this, I felt like it was really thick movement. There has to be a way to be able to change the sensitivity, but at this time I wasn't able to find it. But I was able to pull out what I would consider personally a fairly decent gameplay. Like I said in my last video, I have just a couple dozen hours using an analog controller, so I'm very inexperienced with it. And in Counter-Strike, I was able to go 1 to 2 kill to death ratio. I ended the game with, I believe, 10 kills and 20 deaths. Some headshots in there, some fairly decent kills. You'll see, especially once I'll get switched over automatically to the counter-terrorist side, and you'll see once I get switched over there, I kind of start playing haphazardly like I normally would in a pub, where I just rush long A every round and push through double doors, even though I know there's oppers over there and spawn and things like that. You'll see me doing that, and I do die quite frequently, just due to my haphazard gameplay, and I realize that in this gameplay I did not have any kind of issues with using the analog stick other than my inexperience. My movements, my muscle memory, it isn't built up yet. The movements aren't as fine as they could be. Pre-aiming, I've played a fair amount of Counterstrike Source fairly recently, but not enough to, well, it's been such a long break, probably about 4 months or so, and so my pre-aiming is off a little bit from where it would normally be, and so I didn't do quite as good in that arena as far as just playing the game, regardless of the controller or the input device. We'll call it input device. So what I've done is, on this video, I ended up, the video is like 17 minutes long as it is edited. I went ahead and took out all of the parts. As soon as I die, I cut that and then start at the next round. I mean, there's no real sense in watching the entire round, or, just to watch me play with an Xbox controller. So I condensed it down. I took out rounds where I got no kills or did not die, and was able to take off about 10 minutes from the video, and that should help, you know, kind of get you through that video. In Counter-Strike, to me, especially as far as pubs, it's not the most thrilling game to watch. You know, if you are into competitive playing and you're watching the pros play, that's a different matter. Or you're watching a match, that's a different matter. But when it comes to just pubbing it up, it's just it's really not a fun game to watch. So one of the things that you're going to see me do here, and this is what I was talking about, well, I touched on this in my last video toward the end, but I kind of ran out of time before I talked about everything I wanted to talk about, was that it's not about out-shooting your opponent. It's about outsmarting your opponent. Either using angles to your advantage, watching your mini-map, understanding the patterns that your opponent moves in. Like, if you know this guy pushes through A every time, well, once you're running around the corner, pre-aim and pre-fire that spot. You know, expect him to be there, anticipate him being there. If he's been there every other round since, there's no reason to think otherwise this time. So that's the kind of thing that when I was talking about thinking on your feet in the last video, you have to do that. Pre-aiming is one of the biggest things in any first-person shooter, but especially Counter-Strike, because it is such a tightly tuned game to the point where you may not be the first one down there at long A peeking at double doors. It all depends on where your spawn is and everything like that. And so you have to have your pre-aim right on when you're coming around that corner. Otherwise, you're going to get nailed and you're not going to have time to adjust your aim. So you have to have that spot on. A lot of the mediocre and lower end players that I've spectated in Counter-Strike and even in Call of Duty games, what they tend to do is not expect an enemy around every corner and pre-aim around every corner, but instead they just kind of stare at nothing. They'll stare at the side of a wall that they're running toward, and then when an enemy pops out, they're like, oh, what? Oh, I have to aim and kill this guy, but by the time they do all of that, they're already dead. So always, anytime you're moving through the map, I mean, I would say that, you know, unless you're absolutely 100% positive that there's nobody there, but even then, I wouldn't fall into that lackadaisical attitude very frequently, because you honestly don't know. They could be right there at any moment, and you should always be alert. Beginning of Counter-Strike rounds, you know, there's periods where you definitely know they're not going to be there, but like I said, that's just kind of a bad habit you want to avoid. It's that lazy habit that you want to avoid. So always try to keep sharp, always try to keep alert, keep pre-aiming at those corners, always aim at head level, and use sound. Sound is extremely important, even in Call of Duty. You got to be able to listen. That's what's going to give you those wall hacker-like abilities. You hear them coming, you get your reflexes ready to take that shot when they come around the corner. You sound frequently enough, you actually get used to where they are at by the sound, and are able to actually start firing right when they're coming around the corner. And that is a huge boon, because that puts your perceived reflexes so much lower in response time, than a person who's not using sound. Your perceived reflexes are going to be almost zero. So, or if not zero, or negative numbers even. So using the sound, using your brain is quite important. Beyond that, smart moving. Think of it like a game of real-time chess, I guess, is a good way to put it. When you're moving around the map, and you'll see an instance of this coming up here, but when you're moving around the map, especially once you see an enemy and you see them, they see you, that's the time to start really outthinking your enemy. They know you're there, you know they're there. Take moments when they cannot see you to fool them. So if they saw you and they ran behind a wall, change direction and walk. They will think that you're on one side when you're actually on the other. If you're lucky, they could peek out early or whatnot, and so you have to be ready for that kind of thing. But what you're trying to do here is you're trying to basically juke them, get them to aim in a direction that you're not at, so you can have that perceived reflex advantage. That perceived reflex advantage is exactly what you want. I'm just making that term up, perceived reflex advantage, because our reflexes are pretty set. A good startle reflex is going to land you about 1/10 of a second. 1/10 of a second to 0.15 seconds, somewhere in that range is what a good startle reflex is going to get you. Your standard reflex, just kind of, oh look, there's something there, reflex is going to typically be about 0.2 seconds, maybe 0.25. What you want to do is you want to train yourself to use that startle reflex a little bit more. In first-person shooters, when there's suddenly this huge guy in your face with a gun, that startle reflex is a little bit easier to bring into play. But you want to be able to tap into that whenever you need to. Slower games like Counterstrike, that can be a problem because you kind of you run into B, you're all set up, and now you're waiting. And you're waiting. And you're waiting. And you kind of get a little bored. You get a little distracted, and you're no longer on that edge that gives you that reflex advantage of having the startle reflex. Now, I'm sorry for getting sidetracked here, but back to my main point, the perceived reflex advantage. Perceived reflex is what it seems like you reacted to. And that's based on other information. For instance, in Call of Duty, in Black Ops, when somebody calls in an SR-71 Blackbird, you're going to see their arrows of your opponents moving in real time on your minimap. Now, typically, they are going, like if they're running out from behind a wall, they're going to be well clear of that wall before you have time to react and shoot. So they're going to be well clear of that wall. Using the SR-71 Blackbird lowers what your reaction time seems to be, and that's the perception. It lowers that because you're able to see, okay, this guy's just about to come out now, and you can start firing just before he's about to come out to make it seem like you had no reflex time at all. It happened instantly. And that's what you have to work on improving that perceived reflex time. There's multiple ways to do that. Like I said, minimap, movement, sound, all of that kind of stuff. Use all of these things to your advantage to improve that perceived reflex time. Some games like Counterstrike Source, there was a change in the netcode between Counterstrike Source and Counterstrike 1.6. What the specifics of this is, I don't know, but I did notice significantly the gameplay change for me. What happened is in 1.6, when someone would, like let's say they were using an op, which is a sniper rifle in Counter-Strike, in 1.6 they would peek out, and I would always be able to kill them first because they would have to peek out, stop, and shoot before they could shoot straight and accurately. And I was always able to pick them off first if I were in a standing position and they were strafing out to try to pick me off. The netcode change in Source made it so the person who's standing still is at the disadvantage and the person who's strafing out is the one at the advantage. So what happens is you will see them strafe out and you could have the fastest reaction time in the world, and your shot will always, to my experience, it will always register second. So unless they miss, you are not going to get the kill. If they hit their shot when they strafe out and they peek and they shoulder peek to make that shot, then they will get the kill 100% of the time, no matter if you fired first or whatever happened. I'm not even sure how that works out, how the leg compensation works out, but that's exactly, it doesn't matter. I've tried it every which way I could think of, and the person who's peeking in Source always seems to have the advantage. And I want to say that I can't, you can correct me on this. Feel free to leave a comment if I am wrong about this. But in 1.6, I was able to get those kills, no problem. I was always able to get the person shoulder peeking just to try to kill me. Every single time I was able to get that person. And in Source, it never, ever has happened for me. So I'm not sure if that's part of the netcode for leg compensation or whatever that is. But I want to thank you all again for joining me for this video, for listening to me talk and rant. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Thanks for coming by. Have a great day.